Rorschach, issue 11. Oh, baby. Do you know what? Issue 11 of Strange Adventures was freaking amazing, right?
Mhm.
Like, some of the moments in that book were so exceptional. And it's just interesting that we got another issue 11 and an equally, if not even better, Tom King
Oh,
book, right after it with
it
this.
really all comes together, doesn't it?
It is. This is the issue that kind of clarifies a lot of things. At least, I mean, at the very least, it poses a lot of possible
Through,
solutions.
through the detective character's point of view,
Yes.
it pulls it together. Is that reality? We don't know. That's the one thing.
And will we find out? I'm not sure. It might be left
No.
intentionally ambiguous.
If I had to give a strike against it, that's the kind of thing that's a little bit too ambiguous with the way that the art works with the words, or the script, I should say, the words. Because I tried to do the thing where you just read one and you can't.
No, you
This
can't.
isn't one of those
No.
stories.
Well,
Because you need the interplay between the two panels.
he is having the
right?
conversation with, because
Right.
this is him in his head effectively having a conversation with the kid, and to a point, Meyerson as well, but mostly the kid.
Right.
And
So
the art sort of like does this thing where when we see him asking his side of the conversation,
mhm,
he's in his like hotel room or
Room.
whatever it is,
mhm,
and when we see them,
at the
they're
ranch.
they're at the ranch or maybe other locations if it's relevant to the part of the answers they're giving.
Mhm.
But
So
yeah,
and that's what got me was at the beginning I thought, because as it goes, it becomes more clear what it's doing. I thought maybe this is an intercut, right? And they're playing with our expectations that the conversation the detective's having doesn't necessarily play into what the kid's saying, right? But then when you get to certain things, like they pass each other their beer bottle, right? And the way that that's handled, it's like they're sharing the same space. It's so well done.
yeah,
Like
no,
it's stupid well done.
the structure and the way it bounces
Yeah.
between them, and obviously something like because he's drinking a beer bottle, and obviously
Mhm.
you weren't here for the last issue, but I was raving about that final page from last issue
Mhm.
where he like pulls out the napkin and like picks up the bottle
Uh-huh.
for so he can test it for prints. It
And
was such a game changing moment.
and that at the end of the day, there's there's a black and white, right and wrong, and Turley's definitely on the wrong side of it. However, given the kid's reasons for doing all this, she's not necessarily in the right either.
Oh, of course, because she thinks it's a squid invasion, and we know the squid's a lie.
Right. And so the whole thing is like, yes, sometimes things are justified, but not in the way that you think. And it's just, oh man. And then when you want to add in what this means in the modern times, I was reading so many different layers from King here.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into here. So,
Yeah.
he throws the bottle, and that's kind of what kicks off because we see the bottle land in the other, like,
Mhm.
reality, if you will. Obviously, this is really just in his head, but this is how it
Yeah.
plays out. And it's like the prints match, didn't they? Alan, the guy who hired him, like his prints are on that bottle, and what does that mean? And it spends like a good,
Yeah.
several pages explaining how this all works out and what the actual build up of this is.
Mm-hmm.
And our detective talks about how you laid all this out so I would discover all this, so I'd find it all. But basically, it sets up the idea that the guy they killed, and the reason why they killed him, is because he went there to make sure, because they were setting them up. Like Alan and Co. were setting up the kid and Meyerson because they wanted to set up Redford behind an assassination plot and
attempt on Turley.
Yes.
Not thinking that the kid could actually make the shot, right?
Yes.
These are going to be the patsies. But when he gets there and sees that she can make the shot, he's like, well, we can't do it like this.
Yes.
So he tries to take matters into her own hands, but the kid's like,
and it ties up some loose ends where it's like, okay, it wasn't the secretary who made that call last issue. It was the Alan himself
under duress. It was her, but she was under duress, and and then
no. The phone call she never made. Like it says that quite clearly in this.
Oh yeah, I got you. I thought you were talking about the confession.
No, the confession was her. That was under duress, and then they slit her wrists. Like it wasn't
and
a suicide.
Drowned her in the tub. Yeah.
So. All of this stuff, all these details are kind of explained, and all of this that feels like pretty much taken as fact. And It kind of explains these different things, So this guy, I think it was Oates was the name. He shoots at the kid, which is why they fight back and kill him. Because that was one of the big questions I had that last couple of issues, is that when they showed kind of some of these moments, but out of context, it was like, well, why did they kill him? Like, it never really quite makes it clear. And then this finally kind of clarifies it.
And then, and just the way that Turley wanted this, because knowing that Redford's never going to lose the Vietnam vote, which is such a weird thing to say, right?
Yeah.
that Turley knows that he's not, so he has to use, the comedian's methods, right? Of getting dirty and pulling all these strings and using people that are loyal to him in Redford's own campaign to do all this. And that Rorschach Meyerson being Rorschach, being this paragon of what truth means, right? Can't allow it. And that's why they're on a similar path, right? They were put in that path to stop Turley. And this is now the detective is now part of this.
Yeah, I mean, the first half of this issue is just going through all of these details and explaining how it all fits together. Which it doesn't.
It's airtight.
Yeah,
it's airtight.
And at this point, that's totally fine to do. Is just spend the time doing that, and then and then it gets to the part where the kid says, "You know what you have to do," and he's like, "No, please don't." And we get the page, and we've been speculating this for like half the book at this point, saying. This is leading to him possibly becoming the new Rorschach, because there was all those, just in the art, there was all these things that was making him stand in the same place, or all these little hints that maybe that's where it was going.
He just has the vibe too from the first time we meet him,
And you get this full page that's split into 4 vertical panels, where the first 2 are Rorschach, the second 2 are his face, but they're lined up so that it's like one face like blending together, and it's the Rorschach side says you have to kill him. Which is really emphasizing the idea that this is all him. Like, he's having this conversation with himself, effectively.
Right. And that if Turley did this, right, and that he's put this together, and there's no other way that it can be this is the truth, then he's the only person now. And it kind of goes into that mania that was Rorschach, or I can never remember his actual name. It's Kovacs, Walter Kovacs. That it's this mania for what is the truth, and that what is the truth can drive you nuts, and that here him trying to figure out why this old artist and young sideshow shooter, what they did to end up trying to assassinate a presidential candidate, has now driven him to trying to assassinate the same candidate. It's so wild about how King So for me, it's like how King knows how ideas spread, right? Yeah, he's in the CIA.
And the funny thing about this is that even though the squid story is a lie, we know it's a lie. We know there are reasons for believing that he's going to... Because the kid thinks that he is, he's working for the squids, and it's the squids are coming for us and all this. But in reality, he's going to steal an election and then do who knows what with the power, right? Whatever, because we don't know the specifics of this political party. We've had hints, we've had...
No, but the fact
teases.
That he idolizes the comedian and we know all the bad things the comedian did.
Yeah, there's enough to have a sense that it's not a good idea, right? If he's willing to steal it like this, if he's willing to set up Redford in this way, we know we can't trust this idea. It's all about these conspiracy theories and these ideas that spread.
Well,
and what I like about this next section, though, is that it becomes Meyerson, but not as Rorschach. It's Meyerson at the artist table, drawing his comics. And it gets a little bit meta because he's talking about wearing a mask. He's talking about specifically the person who did the train schedules in Nazi Germany for the concentration camps, and how he was just doing the job he was hired to do. And when he was asked about it in court afterwards, he said, well, either I cannot do it and someone else who will do a poorer job will make their lives even worse, or I do the job as well as I know I can. And, it talks about how he's this cog in the wheel and all the rest of it in responsibility. But then what I really like about this, because obviously that's like a really dark thing to bring up and compare all of our parts in the overall tapestry of the scheme and all the rest of it. But what I really loved about this is when it gets to this idea of, he talks about, he would draw his heroes, his pirates, his superheroes, and the idea that these superheroes were costume characters, and he would draw them in the boxes, because in the boxes he would have control. And to me, this whole idea of, like, in general, the idea of superheroes, the idea of fictional stories is that we have control. And the idea of, like, stories that spread about reality that are false is that we sort of manipulate them into something that we think we can understand and control and have a clear villain. And then that gives us some sort of comfort, because it's not this nuanced thing. We can then say we control it because we are put in. And the idea that Myerson eventually put on a Rorschach mask and said, no, this is clearly the bad guy, and I have to kill him because that's simple. I can take control. Because the biggest fear in the world that any of us have is that we don't control anything, is that the world and fate and happenstance are just going to screw us all over because there's no rhyme or reason to the universe.
Well, yeah, and that the reason too that the whole idea of the citizen and what the duty of the citizen is, right? Like, he has this, says he's at the drawing table, and he's like, the duty of the citizen is to serve the polity. Without the duty of the citizen, the polity reverts to totalitarianism. And so it's this whole idea that we as people, right, we might not have any control, but when we give up that control because you feel like you don't have any, you actually don't have any. So it's this whole idea of you become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that Myerson and the kid, whatever their reasons were, the squids, the whatever, they took that control back. And it goes to when, the kid's a kid, and right after she had shot her dad, she talks about how, they became the heroes, that the Watchmen characters, right? The comedians, the Dr. Manhattans, the Night Owls, the Rorschachs, they left a legacy that now they have to pick up. And so again, to go back to that whole idea of the citizen, is people came before us to fight for the good things. We need to pick that up. We can't just let that go by where people like Turley win. And it was just like, God damn it, King. Why are you so good at this?
Yeah, I think that even ties into what Myerson's saying as well about, drawing stories gave comfort because it was an element of control. He could control anything he put into his stories, anything, because it's in these boxes. Everything fits into these boxes. And then the idea of putting on a mask is then taking back control. So the idea that, because we know she has this tortured background with her father teaching her how to use all these guns and, like, giving her the purpose and all the rest of it. And the idea of finding control and, like, sort of taking things back, and because her father basically taught her that, is that, no, we can control everything if we plan for all this. And I think one of the things that I love, the transition, it's just when the detective's getting undressed to go to bed, and he's saying, no, you're a guy who draws pirates. And he's like, yeah, but I drew pirates. I put the world in its place, panel by panel, thousands of them. This is the main part I was getting to about the controls. Like, now I see all those lines pushed into place, and I didn't draw anything. He sees those panels in the real world. He sees the separation of elements, the lines that separate things. Have you ever looked at your hand? There's no line around or cross hatching, but that's all I had. I never drew a hand. I see so many lines. I traced ink over pencil. And all the patterns I put for them there, I'm responsible for them. I drew the lines looking back. And the transition here that I really like is the idea that as the kid's father in this flashback, as this dialogue's going, it's not, if anything, because he's speaking here as if he is the kid's father, right? That's this kind of the weird thing about this little sequence. But he's picking up, I guess it's kind of like going back to the idea that he influenced her because she grew up on his art. So it's kind of like he was this father figure to her even before when she did have a father. But so the idea that her real father and Myerson have kind of merged into one in her mind.
And which one she felt closer to.
Yeah.
Right?
But the transition,
biological father or this guy.
The transition here I really like, though, is that as he picks up the gun in this last panel, some of the balloons from the conference, the press conference,
the rally,
that those are starting to actually float up in the frame, and we get this great panel where it's split in two vertical panels on the page, and Rorschach, Myerson, is holding up the gun and says, "I see only myself." And as he's pointing the gun, the other panel in the hotel room is just the detective completely naked, completely bare and exposed, saying, "I can't," because it's them saying, "No, you need to kill him. You need to kill Turley because he's evil. He's going to do all this, and we get this really shocking like, sort of sequence where Rorschach shoots him in the face. The bullet goes across, and he's lying on the bed with blood splatter all over his face. But of course, he's not really dead. It's not a real bullet,
No.
right?
No, but it makes a Rorschach mask on his face.
It does, yeah.
With the blood, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful stuff. He's been stripped of the disguise of like the regular humanity and become what he really is, which is someone who is there to become a Rorschach, right? And then he gets a call. Alan saying, "Come and Turley wants to speak to you. Bring all the evidence. I know it's like midnight, but that's fine." And obviously, like, are they going to kill him for what he's discovered? Like, so he can't trace anything. I was getting that vibe. Because now that they've got the evidence, they don't need him anymore. And that's why they hired him, because they couldn't find the tape. They had to track down this tape. So he gets up, he washes himself. It's all silent panels. And the last page is him getting in the elevator, and there's this yuppie who's there.
He's the worst.
Yeah, he's in LA to see a girlfriend, and he's like, maybe I should come out here. All these nice girls, New York sucks at nighttime. And I'm like, wait, New York society never sleeps. I actually thought that in my head. And then he says, ever since the squid, that city just goes to sleep at night. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, it's a difference because of what happened.
The
New
cultural
York's,
difference.
Yeah, so that's kind of neat. He's like, maybe I should move out here because LA is great, and it's just all these girls out here, and blah 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 blah. You don't get that sense, in New York, but you get that out here, right? And the final panel, this guy's like, hey, you know what I mean, right? The LA is full of girls, and it's all this nightlife. It's great. And the final panel is just our detective going, just like Rorschach.
Yeah. So he's been incepted. So as you were having that, I realized.
Yes.
What is a Rorschach test?
Right? A Rorschach test is when you hold up an ink blot and you ask the person what they see in it.
And there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's what it is to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's here with this is that Rorschach has the concept here of Meyerson and the kid. It was held up to him, and this is what he saw. And this is why he becomes the next Rorschach.
It's this really fascinating, conflicting thing, because we know Turley is lately an evil bastard and probably should be stopped, although probably not by assassination, because that's all of some kettle of fish, and we know that
anybody listening to this, yes. And
a lot of this is based on a lie, because we know the squids aren't real, and that's all made up.
No.
But at the same time, they were onto something.
Bastard. Yeah, they cannot be allowed to be president.
They were onto something. They found something real, and because they were hired to do this, and they kind of realized these, and they left all these clues.
Right. Over the course of 2019, there was the phrase, "It's not the crime, it's the cover-up." Right? And that's what I feel King was kind of working on here, was that concept of it's not necessarily the crime that was committed, it was the cover-up of said crime, because the crime itself wasn't huge, right? Like here, sure, but the fact that they went through all of these other things to cover up the crime was worse than what they originally intended, and then that's what leads them basically to what I feel is going to be the downfall. Although it is set in the Watchmen universe, so that could mean anything at this point. Like you said, this could all just be his version of reality, and it's not real, it's whatever, and he's going in there on a suicide mission. Or they're going to take him out because of what he found out.
I don't know why I just predict the ending here, but I mean, I can see him dying, but I can see him dying and taking Turley with him, and ending. Well, and then this.
What does that inspire next? Who does that go to? Whose truth is that now? And it's just, man, King's so good at this. It's so stupid.
It's really fascinating that these characters were, everything they're doing to an extent is based on a lie. A lie spread, and it created this fear, and obviously this comic book it puts us in a difficult position as a reader, because it's making you sympathize with people who are actually doing bad things, and it's making you think about why they're doing those things. Even if you happen to agree that the villain that ultimately they were going after is maybe villainous and should be taken down, it is forcing you to think about it in different ways that aren't just here's the good guy, here's the bad guy. It's not that simple. Which I think is why it's so great that we have that section with Myerson talking about making this world make sense and taking control by drawing it as superheroes or as pirates in a comic book, because you make it simple. But by trying to force it to be simple when it's not simple, you're taking away all the nuance. And I think one of the things that sticks out to me about the spread of misinformation and information that's used to create narratives that aren't true or backing up, agendas, will it be political or just stupid because people don't want to wear masks or something, whatever it may be. Let's not get into those specifics.
No.
But the idea being that taking those and making them be simple and ignoring the truths or ignoring the details or not thinking about the facts and just hand waving them away because they don't fit your version of events it's dangerous. That's the point.
Well, yeah, it is.
Is that it's dangerous and it creates extremists, and that's ultimately, regardless of maybe them getting after the right person, the kid and Myerson are still extremists and they're still assassins.
No, right.
Yeah,
and that's what makes these types of movements so captivating to other people, because it creates a simple answer to a complex problem, right? And you don't want to waste time thinking about all of the repercussions of everything. So you just make up, it's the squids, right? And if we take him out, then the squids are thwarted. And it's like, well, no, there are bigger problems with Turley. But if the kid took time to try to dissect each and every one of those, it's just going to create a bigger thing. So they create a simple answer, and then that's what they go with.
And what conspiracy is born? Let's say he pulls this off and kills Turley. What conspiracy is then born because the candidate that was going to race against Redford is killed?
Did you just create a martyr? Right?
Yeah.
Are they going to circle back up around and come back even stronger? And that's the scary thing. That's all the calculus. And again, coming from Tom King, whose mind is, he was in the CIA. He's seen some underhanded stuff.
Because this is not a simple story where we're just rooting because he's our main character. We're not just rooting for him to succeed because we think, Turley's a bad guy and he should kill him. It's not that simple. This is not a simple story like that in any way, shape, or form. And that's what makes it so fascinating and interesting, and easy to dissect. And I think the fact that I don't think we've ever had a name for our main character is intentional at this point, because he is an avatar. He is this kind of blank
he's a
slate.
cipher.
Yeah,
he's an everyman. So no, it's so good. And then Fornes just kills it on the art, with the colors that shift between the kid and the detective, and just it goes from super cold with the detective to warm with the kid.
Yeah, it's almost like there's comfort in the warm side because they have accepted it. At least they have created the illusion to themselves that they have accepted what they are.
Right.
And if you analyze it from the perspective of this is all in his head, and he's envisioning them in the warm, happier place because they've come to peace with what they are, right or wrong as that may be. And he himself is in this cold, rainy world. The idea that he's looking across the aisle at this delusion and going, that's appealing because it's the warm and the comforting one. That's the one that looks like they've made things simple and they are happy and they know what their direction in life is over there. That's appealing. I kind of want a piece of that. Like, that's the subtlety of that coloring, which is really, really smart. And then everything, of course, comes in pairs because it's all, there's a lot of 6-panel grids where, one half's the blue and one half's the orange or the yellow. And then there's a lot of, where you get a full page of one, then a full page of the other. It's playing with that constantly. So, no, the art is exceptional.
Really, really good. So.
Yeah. And then whenever there is a blood spat of some way, it's really good. And I think it's worth mentioning, looking back through the issue, you also have the Rorschach created with the Bullet and her father, when we see that again earlier in the issue, which I think is a kind of an intentional parallel between that panel and then later on what happens to our main character, or what he envisions happens to his main character. The idea that for the kid, this was her moment of seeing that, Rorschach was in her father and then it was going to someone else. So again, it connects those two things. Really good stuff. It's
Mhm.
it's phenomenal. I mean, what are you giving this issue, Matt?
I'm giving this one a 10.
It's hard to argue with.
It is.
It-
It's just everything came together. So, whereas the last one was really good, I felt it, but it left me at a place where I was like, just almost there, right? And this followed up on everything that was almost there. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with the 10. I was trying to argue myself down at 9.5, but
yeah,
I think I'm.
I can't believe that fool Connor doesn't read this.
I know he is an idiot, isn't he?